And we're live. Welcome back to the LOOPcast. Warm welcome to everyone joining live in the chat. And I hope you all had a great weekend. We have a great show prepared for you today. There is market activity happening literally as we speak. Some people are taking tweets from people at the last day of Bloomberg very seriously right now, even if they're not serious. But happy to be joined by Erica and Josh today. Erica, what do we have going on today's show?
Yeah, so we've got tariffs galore, as Tom alluded to, and we're going to learn yet more about tariffs. Wish I'd taken that degree in economics nowadays. So we've got tariffs. We have Brian Burch. Brian Burch is in the hot seat tomorrow. We'll talk a little bit about our nominee to ambassador for the Holy See. We have also got my favorite trad wives. We have milkmaid dresses. We have milk cows, and our trad wives on the rise. Meagan Kelly had something to say about it, so it's going to be a great show.
Oh man, awesome, Josh, and you got some swag on today. What's going on?
Well, good. There's a friendly rivalry, at least in Brian's mind, between our alma maters. I went to Hillsdale College, and he went to Hillsdale's younger brother, the University of Dallas.
What is Brian on? That's not a real rivalry.
I mean, the thing is,
all due respect.
I know. It's a faux rivalry. It's in his.
Everything's a competition with Brian Burch.
True. He creates haters in his head, which I love. I do the same thing.
But out of respect for Brian and his hearing tomorrow, I am wearing a T-shirt to the University of Dallas. So
you're a bigger man than he is.
Shout out to University of Dallas.
I am a bigger man because he's brown in the shirt.
Making this show possible in a world where people can often feel alone and like nothing really matters. The University of Dallas is different. It's a place where students can build strong friendships, grow in their faith, and work hard to learn important things, all while searching for truth, wisdom, and goodness. University of Dallas alumnus Brian Burch is responding to this quest in an extraordinary way. Donald Trump has nominated him as ambassador to the Holy See. The University of Dallas applauds Brian for his personal witness, advocacy, and the great work that he has been called to do. As University of Dallas President Jonathan J. Stanford stated, Brian is a man of deep Catholic faith, strong character, and genuine prudence. We could not be prouder of him. I throw on my hat with that as well. He's a great man. Learn more about Brian's alma mater, the University of Dallas, and join Brian's fellow alumni who are praying for him during his ongoing nomination process by clicking the link in the description below. Rosie, if you could throw that in the chat for us, that would be great. Go ahead and join. Shout out to University of Dallas for making this show possible.
Well, and University of Dallas, they have a great semester in Rome for their students, and most of the kids go through that program. So if Brian is confirmed, they're going to have just that much of a better experience getting to know the alumnus there, the ambassador. That's really cool.
Yeah, he's returning home a little bit.
Yes, because he did that semester abroad in Rome as well. And, we've had several people that work for Catholic Vote or intern here that are from the University of Dallas. So nothing but thumbs up from all of us. Good people, good university. So
yeah, I actually had a alumni send me a mug out of the goodness of her heart. Aww. Like she didn't even work for the school. She just loved the school. She's like, you guys keep talking about other schools. You got to start talking about University of Dallas. And look, I'm partial to bribes. So if you want to send me cool mugs, I'll take them. It has a night on it.
T-shirts or whatever,
Yeah, whatever.
Nope.
But good stuff. But speaking of, hopefully those mugs are not made in China or internationally because we have a tariff war going on for all the stock market heads out there. I'll give you a quick picture of what we're looking at. Personally, I'm not a stock market head, so this really doesn't mean a whole lot to me, but it's a lot of red. For those curious, for those audio listeners, we have 2.1 trillion wiped out from the U.S. stock market at open. I actually think it's jumped up. A lot of this is happening in real time, which is interesting to do a live podcast during it. But yes, people are freaking out, especially people that manufacture goods in other countries. Not a great time to be doing that. So just an update on a lot of that. Goldman Sachs hikes its recession probability to 45% up from 35%. And it said if most of the April 9th tariffs do take effect, then we expect to change our forecast to a recession. And I think the bigger thing here is up until this April 9th, are we going to see either the U.S. drop these tariffs? Are people going to respond? Is there going to be negotiations? And as of, I think, like a half hour ago, the EU has said that they're ready to negotiate with the United States, saying they've offered zero tariffs. That's encouraging. On the flip side, China has retaliated with reciprocal tariffs. China imposed a 34% tariff on all U.S. imports effective April 10th, 2025. That's matching the rate of Trump's latest tariffs. This was a broad across the board levy targeting all American goods entering China. Josh, how do we feel about all this?
Yeah, there's thinking that the negotiations with China might actually, start sooner than some of these other countries, simply because China is really kind of running out of air to breathe. If they don't have the American market, which provides so much cash to their economy, then their ability to do anything, to ride any kind of wave, is really limited. So they might really try to rush to try to get something, but we'll see. Again, uh, markets hate uncertainty, but if you're negotiating like Trump with all these other countries, you're valuing the uncertainty in a sense. And so that's why this morning, when there was that errant tweet that everyone thought really came from someone that worked at Bloomberg News, in fact, it was just some dude
with the last name Bloomberg, and everyone was like, "Whoa!" And it just
Yeah.
spiked
The
Vanguard.
tweet said, Trump is open to like a 90-day pause on the tariffs, and the White House immediately was like, yeah, no. This is absolutely fake news. This is not the case. They may be open to something like that, but there's no way that they would forecast that, because they want people to assume like, hey, we're serious about this. And again, the idea is to tax or tariff the import of goods so that you can try to reshore jobs here in the United States, that you can open up factories and stuff like that. Now, especially when you've got a situation like you have all these fanciful articles. So like there's articles in, I don't know if it was Forbes or something like that said, oh, you like your iPhone? It's going to cost $10,000 now with all these tariffs. And you're like, what? Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous, like some of the stuff that we're hearing. But again, I do think, the point of the tariffs is to try to, how can you consider yourself competing against China when they're able to engage in essentially slave wages and undercut everything that you're doing?
So I have theories, Josh. I have theories as to here's Tom's theory as to why tariff chaos makes sense in this case. And I'm going to start this with either intentionally or non-intentionally. When the announcement dropped is when everyone started freaking out. But for those who've been paying attention, Scott Bessent has been very clear, and Trump has been very clear about what he thought tariffs were and that they were going to use them. There's a long lead up to this. Scott Bessent wrote a good article in The Economist, I believe, about this. Essentially, tariffs are part of the stool in what they're calling like reorganizing the world order, that economic world order that the United States actually was directly responsible for creating in a lot of ways.
Right.
And they're very upfront about that.
Very upfront about this. This is going to happen. Tariffs are a smaller piece to this kind of renegotiation for reorganizing the world in terms of labor. So I'll start with, before I go into why the stock market I don't think really matters a ton to the average American. Like if you were to go to someone who worked at Walmart and show them this, they wouldn't care. I've actually seen some of Trump's approval numbers go up. But basically, what happened with his first trade war in 2016, trade war, quote unquote, when he put tariffs on China, the administration's been quick to bring up, well, inflation didn't really go up pretty much at all. If anything, the average wage of the American home went up. The reason why that didn't work and it didn't stick was because we only were putting tariffs on China and not the entire world. What ended up happening was China actually just exported more. They pulled the lever. They started exporting more to Mexico. And then Mexico was sending in things to the United States. So it wasn't working. And that's why you see this broadband 10% tariff everywhere, obviously harder on China than they are there.
Yeah, that's why Margaret Brennan was going after.
Right.
Hey, why are you taxing, it's a Peter Navarro thing. He's like, why do you have this 10% tariff on this island that all that they have are penguins? And he's like, because last time we tried to do it, as you said, they would end up using these loopholes. And so China would use Vietnam, they would use Mexico, they'd use some of these other countries. So you could imagine China setting up a little like port at that island of penguins and funnel everything through there. And then there's no tariffs. So it's like, nope, we're going to put a tariff even on this. Everything, no doubt. Every country.
Part of what needs to be done here, and here's a graph. There's a good video. I'll share the link for it later. But basically, this is manufacturing value added percent per output. And you look in 1947, the United States is up to like 28%, I would say. And right now we're down to about 10% in 2024. Now, part of the problem is, go ahead.
Part of this is, I always hate where people do on the statistics, because if you think about it, the immediate post World War II world, you've got London in shambles, Germany is smashed, France, they had lost so many of their men. Like all the manufacturing is going to be coming out of the United States practically, of course. Right. And there's no way that was sustainable. So after 15, 20 years, as Germany comes back on board, as France comes back on board, we see these adjustments to our own economy, and all of a sudden we realize we're not getting this massive comparative advantage because we were the only one providing. And that's why the 70s, kind of hit us hard, because we just thought that would keep going on forever. And we never made the appropriate adjustments to that. But
sure. Especially when the Soviet Union fell. So, I mean, we had all during that time, it was the Cold War as well. And so it was in our interest to have this free trade, if not fair trade, with all of our allies in Europe. And then when the Soviet Union fell, instead of making any course correction or any adjustment there, we just sort of went on this like the high of the 90s, right? And yeah.
I almost don't even, it almost is, it's not irrelevant, but the point that I'm trying to make is Donald Trump and Scott Bessent and this administration are saying that our current levels of manufacturing are a complete detriment to national security. And I would tend to agree with that. We don't make necessary medicine here. We get that from India. We don't make our ships. I think ships are made over in China.
Or we have chips, right?
Chips made in Taiwan. We have a real national security problem on our hands. We need to reorient our economy to basically be prepared for either a war, be prepared for another outbreak. The way that our country has moved after we moved from the Bretton Woods system is we've basically became the world's buyer, and we got rid of all of making things in America. Opening up free trade has been phenomenal for the top 1% of this country. Made them fabulously wealthy by shipping over jobs overseas to the cheapest possible places in which there's sketchy labor laws, child labor laws, whatever it is. This is the situation we're in now. So in an effort to bring some of this back, you get the current tariff regime. Tariffs have always been seen as this lever for negotiation. I think people are missing when they're just freaking out in the short term about this. They're not seeing that previously, before Bretton Woods, we had this system of green, yellow, and red countries. And Scott Bessent talks about this extensively up to this point. Green countries are people we see as good trading partners, allies, people that we want to lower barriers to because we want to work with them. Yellow is somewhat of a neutral situation where we're not like allies with them, but we're not per se enemies. They don't really get benefits, but we're not like hitting them with heavy tariffs. And then red would be, China would be the classic example of a red country we want to hit with tariffs. They're considered an adversary. They're not good allies. They do all types of deceptive things. Currency manipulation,
IP violations, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally. And so what was interesting, this video I saw, basically, it was like why Trump's tariff cast actually makes sense, big picture, was talking about, he affectionately called it the Mar-a-Lago Accord, but basically it's an attempt to weaken the dollar while maintaining its status as the world currency. This wouldn't be the first time we've done this. This would be the second time, first time being moving away from the gold system. The problem with that was we wanted the dollar to become the dominant currency around the world. And in order to do that, because it was tied to gold, other countries were buying too much of that to the point where we didn't have enough in the country. And what happened was we opened that up. We printed more of the dollar so that more of the world can buy this currency, at the same time devaluing what we had going on now. But because we had, like, imagine buyers going from just Americans to the entire world's becoming buyers. And so now they're buying this dollar. What we're attempting to do, this is an interesting gambit. We'll see if it pays off or not. If you're a green country, so with all the tariffs we just slapped on everyone, they come to the negotiating table and we say, look, we'll take these tariffs off. You need access to the American market because we consume by, orders of magnitude much more than the rest of the country. If you want access to this, we'll bring our tariffs down. You bring your tariffs down. But
Promise
in return,
not to be a conduit for China.
Exactly. In return, you need to inflate your currency to match the dollar, therefore devaluing the dollar. But why would someone do this, right? Because that gives people a tremendous advantage when it comes to exporting, is having a cheaper, weaker currency relative to the US dollar. Because stronger dollar means we can buy more there, they can export more. The reason they do that, the argument is they get access to the massive American market that I talked about. You would get benefits of our defense, as we've pretty much been giving that out for free. Like a good example would be hitting the Houthis or whatever. Like we basically bail everyone out around the world in terms of defense, which is expensive. And then you get access to the dollar system, which we're making the gambit here that we're going to stay on this dollar system. So I guess the point that
I think what they would extract out of EU is like, okay, bump that percentage of how much you support to NATO
Certainly.
too.
Yeah.
Right.
So people are just looking at the tariff, but they're not looking at, say, like the political negotiations going on, the defense negotiations going on, the trade negotiations going on. They're all a part of what Donald Trump is, what Besant and Trump are saying, reordering how past the neoliberal world order. This is the new reality in which our trade partners need to become better partners to us. We're no longer the global hegemon. We need to bring manufacturing back to America because for national defense reasons. And then also a lot of reasons that I want to bring up here, like if you look at this stock market, basically to the average American, this was super telling to me. The evolution of top incomes in the United States, and this is with 2019 to 2021 estimates. And it's a little bit tough to see here, but from 2019, the year before COVID crisis hit, to 2021, the year the economy recovered from the crisis, real average incomes per family have grown 13.1%. The very large growth hides substantial inequality as the bottom 99% real incomes grew by only 4.1% from 2019 to 2021, while the top 1% grew by 46.6%. Mm-hmm. Hence, the top 1% families captured 75% of total real income growth per family from 2019 to 2021. By 2021, the top 1% income share has reached an all-time high of 27.4%, much higher than the previous record of 23.9% in 1928, all the way back to 1928, which is crazy.
And I think, Steve Cortez, who works with Catholic Vote, he had a great video on this. I don't know if we can pull that clip up, but he's making the point about the disparity between the top. So last week when we talked about the tariffs, there's a big argument going on of like, look, the economy is actually not that bad. Like we live a better quality of life than people in medieval England or whatever, because we have antibiotics and we have access to all these products and goods. And that's a reason not to do anything about it. But I think what Steve did in this video, do you think we can play it, Tom?
I can, yeah.
What he did is really kind of blow that out of the water. These are some great stats. Listen.
Patriots, we need to reorder our economy so that it once again works for working class Americans. Let me give you a stark example, one that has been highlighted by Treasury Secretary Besant. Last year in 2024, a record number of Americans took European vacations. That's a wonderful thing. But at the same time, concurrently in 2024, a record number of American citizens visited food banks to meet their most basic needs. That divergence right there, that bifurcation, tells us that this economy is not working. And in some ways is actually even worse than the Great Depression, because even then, almost a century ago, while there was dire need, we did not see the high end, the top tier economically soaring and getting wealthier and wealthier while the working class masses suffered, as we are seeing today as a result of Bidenomics. And I would give some advice to my friends on the right who are supposed free trade advocates. Populism, because of that divergence I just mentioned, populism is ascendant. The question is, do you want populism of the left, the Bernie Sanders AOC variety, or do you want populism of the right?
Exactly.
The America First, Donald Trump, Scott Bessent variety. The reality is tariffs are absolutely necessary for many reasons, but the primary one being to reorient our economy to again reward production in this country and the employment of working class citizens all across our land, so that massive amounts of visits to food banks becomes an unhappy memory of the past.
Yeah.
So, incidentally, Eric Erickson, who's sort of a neocon guy out of Atlanta, Georgia, with his own radio program, he went bananas over this clip, and he said, the right is starting to sound like Karl Marx, which should be a warning sign. Here's the thing.
No.
The way that the neocons and libertarians are looking at this is like, what, you're trying to orient the economy, you're trying to do a control of the economy. It's like, guys, stop it. What we have done over the last 35 years, starting with like NAFTA, accelerating with Bill Clinton, allowing China into the World Trade Organization, those guys were orienting the economy towards massive free trade, even with slave countries, gutting our industrial base, and creating an American economy that was extremely dependent on foreign imports on everything, and making us a consumerist economy rather than building stuff here. That works great if in this it is thought. It works great if, hey, the Soviet Union is gone and we're going to have, it's the end of history, as it was said, and we're going to have decades and decades and generations of prosperity, and there'll never be another problem again. Yeah,
war to end all wars. No more war.
And so the idea is that shift that we did away from having manufacturing on our own shore and allowing China to gut us in manufacturing. That was a deliberate choice by our lawmakers. We now have the opportunity and the choice to say, maybe we should return to tradition and return to a system where we will use tariffs to make sure that we're not being gutted and allowing some people in this country to get extremely wealthy, like Phil Knight.
Yep, great example.
Again, here's a guy who travels to the Orient in the 60s and finds out, oh my gosh, there's tons of people who would work for super cheap wages. I'll set up sweatshops in these Asian countries and make shoes for super cheap and make profits coming out of my ears and gut the shoe manufacturing in the United States. Now, the only shoes that were made in the United States, there's a few Red Wing shoes in Minnesota. There's the Converse All-Stars, and then the boots that are made for military men and women. Other than that, it's gone. It's been wiped out. And Phil Knight makes billions of dollars, and he gives it to left-wing causes. Aha, what a shock.
Yeah.
Again, so the idea is look, Abraham Lincoln was in favor of getting rid of slavery because you were undercutting the wages of free men. It was unjust to the people, the slaves themselves, of course, but it was also unjust to the whites in the North. Look, you're having to compete against people with slave wages. This is insane. That's why also, by the way, Abraham Lincoln was a big fan of tariffs. It's I'm not going to let some other country that has no rule of law, that allows their leaders to control their population like slaves and serfs, let them to flood our market with cheap goods. That's what tariffs can do. It can protect you. Every town in the Midwest, you just make a drive and you could see towns where, the industrial base was gutted. And what do we get for it? Oh, well,
and that was I want to be clear here. That was a reorientation. So hilarious.
Deliberate action.
It's you reorient either through the democratically elected president, Donald Trump, or you will be reorientated. Someone will reorient for you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Reality will slap you upside the face.
Ahead,
and
Erica,
I think the point about debt there is really important too, is we talk as if there was no debt. And I think Scott Bessent in one of his interviews made this point that the top tiers of society we have houses, we have vacations in Europe, and the bottom 50% of Americans have credit card debt. And they can't afford a home and they can't afford this. Not only do the people have debt, but our nation is awash in debt. So there's also the point about revenue, right? With the tariffs, is that can the revenue from tariffs make up the difference and eliminate our debt and pay off? No, because it's so huge. But can it start to cut into it? Yes. And morally and practically, we have to start to do that. So I think revenue is also an urgent Trump administration consideration as well in all of these tariffs.
And then you won't have to sign up for a payment plan to DoorDash Chipotle to your door or whatever
you're going to put Klarna for your burger.
That should have been the big red bell flag. Booming alarm. We are legitimately having a conversation about financing fast food. We are in a problem.
Oh my gosh.
And it's the one guy said that, all the non-STEM people who are going into jobs, they're going into real estate, they're going into nonprofit work.
It's all service sector.
Right. What happened to our manufacturing base?
Which is hilarious because nonprofits look,
I work for one.
We are a nonprofit. I'm going to be very clear about that.
White collar.
But nonprofits are at the highest level. Right. They're at the highest level that they ever are. So you just get these oligarchs that fund their pet projects through nonprofits that they pour a ton of money into, and we have more than ever. So Tim Dillon put this perfectly. He did a whole rant about how this is like if Charlie the Chocolate Factory, if Charlie sold his production to China, and then all of a sudden there was Oompa Loompas working at Panera and addicted to fentanyl. which I think is largely
What?
Accurate.
If just philosophically, if you were to go, scour the world to find the cheapest possible labor and move it over there, and there's no barriers, and then you can do that, you can send it back. The people that previously had good jobs, thanks to unions, thanks to the availability of high-paying jobs, thanks to the fact that we were manufacturing things here in America, we had a high trust society, and then good laws, things like that.
High wages.
They were high wages. Wages have stagnated, have definitely not kept up with productivity since like the 40s, I think.
Right.
I think it is impossible
where it went up.
People, and then what's hilarious to me is people are saying like, "Oh, do you think people are even going to want to go back and manufacture? Like, who would want to go back to the previous situation?"
I cannot stand that. Who is sounding that alarm? Oh, all of the white collar interns at the Washington D.C. based nonprofits, NGOs.
It almost doesn't matter.
I don't want to make things for 40 hours a week. You know what people want?
We get it. You're weakling. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like. What people want is to be able to have a job where they can support a family on one income so that the wife doesn't have to outsource all of her, getting into trad wives a little early here, don't have to outsource all your childcare, and you can't afford a home until you're like 45 years old. That's what people want. And if that takes, if you have to work in manufacturing 40 hours a week, that's what my grandfather did. He worked for GE. He worked 40 hours a week. He had enough money to support a family of 5 kids outside of Boston in the 1950s and 60s. And
it was hard
people
work.
would like that. It was hard work. And it wasn't like, oh, it's a fulfilling career where I get to like discover myself every day. And
right.
You're just making widgets.
A lot of those men then said to their kids, work smarter, not harder, get a college degree and order people around and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, that works.
We got the 70s.
I guess for some people, but not everyone's going to be able to be in management. You actually do need people to do the hard work,
to put in the work,
and the manufacturing. I like this quote by Matthew Peterson. I think is pretty good. He said, "My entire life, I've heard very important people say that regular Americans just have to suffer short term through economic hardship for the sake of the overall good of the country. And if they fail longer term, well, it's their own fault. NAFTA, 2008 crash, COVID, you name it." He continues, "I'm not the only one noticing that there's a certain group of people that aren't saying that right now. It's like, hey, so you stockholders, maybe you should go through a little short-term pain for the rest of us." I think we should put that quote up by the great senator from Missouri, Eric Schmidt, who is a Catholic. This guy understands what's going on, I think, so much better than so many other people do. There's an understanding that we're not just, what is it that we are as the United States of America? What are we?
America is not an economic zone. America isn't a strip mall with an airport attached to it. America is a place. It's our home. It's our people. People deserve to live meaningful lives with meaningful work. They don't deserve to have all those jobs shipped overseas and then us be left with cheap T-shirts. This is about reasserting American greatness, and I think President Trump's on the right track.
That is, by the way, a good Catholic man too, by the way, Eric Schmidt. And you would think the Catholic left would say, whoa, wait a minute. We're going to put tariffs to try to reshore our jobs, rebuild the manufacturing base, and give a broad-based high wage. Forget about the wealthiest 1%. You would think the Catholic left would love this program.
Oh.
You'd be mistaken.
Just thought experiment here briefly.
I love thought experiments.
Okay, so for all the people that are like, no one's going to manufacture. So the idea behind these tariffs and a lot of the economic policy is, all right, we're going to bring manufacturers here. Say we're going to build like a chip factory or something to contribute to the future of American dominance in AI, whatever you want to say. Chips are just an example. If you could work in that chip factory, make like $60K, $70K, have phenomenal benefits, you could actually buy a home reasonable to your share of income. So like instead of homes being $400,000, they're like $200,000. You'd have cheap groceries, so you'd be able to afford, your purchasing power would go up, and then you'd work in a modern factory with modern tools and modern protections. Like that to me, compared to what, door dashing or something, working at Panera, as a young man, I'd be able to support, very much support a family on that type of money. Now, I'm not saying that that's like what you get paid or whatever, but that's kind of the idea of what we're working towards here. which would actually be very much on par with what working in a factory in the 60s was like, minus some of the modern protections that you'd actually benefit from now. Being able to afford a home, being able to pay cheap groceries. Maybe you don't have, 20 different options of cereal, but you could buy eggs. Imagine that. Your wife didn't have to work. You'd have good connections. You'd feel fulfilled in your job. You're actually using your hands and creating something. And look, I'm behind a microphone right now, a podcast. If this doesn't end up going anywhere, I would be pretty happy with that. I'd have to say, if I was really contributing something, there's opportunities for advancement. I felt like we were really on the cutting edge of something. I just, all the people that speak against that, what's the alternative? Like you DoorDashing, financing DoorDash, doing some type of service thing, getting a college degree, being in a ton of debt, not knowing what you're doing, like no path forward other than just investing in the stock market, buying the dip. Like we just live in such a fake financialized world right now. It's like hard. I think people see the writing on the wall here. We can't continue on a system propped up by government spending to the billionth degree, whether that's on useless government jobs.
We see it all over in every neighborhood. I mean, like, why is this house worth twice what it was 5 years ago? That doesn't make any sense at all. Like, what is going on? Like housing prices. And it just didn't add up. It's like, well, we pumped a ton of cheap money into the economy because of COVID. That's going to have a lot of disastrous effects. And it's going to take a long time to kind of wring that out of the economy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully this is the first step towards it. So,
yeah.
All right. Before we get into the next section.
I agree with what you said last time. It's better if we're able to get this thing going and start the path towards clearer thing. Like it's much better. Like if you're drinking way too much and you're like, I need to sober up. That's better to do it on your timeline than to be, like have your body shut down.
Than to wait for cirrhosis to kill you. Right.
Yeah.
It's going to end, guys. It's going to end. This is a better way for it to end.
Yes. Take command of the situation.
Yeah.
Right.
And definitely, I think offers a really optimistic view for young people. I think people rag on the boomers too much for mortgaging out the future.
Do we?
I mean, the boomers were pretty bad, but mortgaging out the future so that they can go play golf in Florida based on their retirement and 401k and stuff like that. Like, yes, I understand those concerns to an extent, but for like, what is it saying if an entire generation of Americans are saddled with debt, can't afford a home, barely making ends meet, don't have a useful degree or path forward, no job prospects that are really good? I think we're hopefully getting out of the era in which we're discriminating against people based on their race and injecting weird race DEI stuff in here. Like it's a pretty bleak future, I think, for a lot of young men and women. And I'm talking about the majority, right? Not the top percentage of college performers that get a good degree, like, are the high achieving, whatever. Like we should want for our fellow Americans, our average fellow American, to offer them legitimate prospects of the American dream. And I just think it's really evaporated due to bad government policy, private sector selling out America. And we're just moving to this like kind of fake, unfulfilling consumerist economy based on just spending at debt levels.
Well, and
I
again,
don't think this is a good picture for Americans.
Someone in the chat was said, but I'm, near retirement and I'm concerned about the stocks. And I would just say there's a great speech. I think it was Peter Lynch from like 94. And he said, was making the rounds on the social media, went viral again. And he said of the last, 100 years, of the 93 years of the 20th century so far, he said there's been 49 corrections. It's like of 10% or more. It's like every 2 years you get a correction. And then every 6 years you get a 20% correction, which is a bear market. These are natural, but then the overall trend is still upward, And so like, I would just caution everybody, do not panic. I mean, it does not make sense to panic. The overall, economy of the United States is still in good shape. We just need to get rid of some of this, excess inflationary spending that we've, indulged over, at the first part of this decade.
Absolutely. All right. Before we get into the next section, thank you to Home Title Lock for sponsoring this episode. Did you know that American homeowners have over $32 trillion in equity, and criminals are targeting it with a growing scam the FBI calls house stealing? Scammers can transfer your title out of your name using a one-page document they file at the county. Then they can take loans against it or even sell it behind your back. And the scariest part, you won't find out about it until collection or foreclosure notices start arriving in your mailbox, leaving you with a financial and legal nightmare. The best way to protect your equity is with Home Title Lock's exclusive $1 million triple lock protection. This service offers 24/7 monitoring, urgent alerts, and if fraud should occur, their US-based restoration team will spend up to $1 million to fix the fraud and restore your title. So, when was the last time you checked on your title? If you're like me, the answer is never, and that's exactly what scammers are counting on. The good news is we've partnered with Home Title Lock to offer you 30% off of their services. So go to HometitleLock.com/LOOPcast to save 30%, and you'll also get a free title history report to ensure you're not already a victim. And make sure you check out the $1 million triple lock protection details when you get there. Click on that link in the description below. That is HometitleLock.com/LOOPcast. Thank you. I feel like we already covered Brian pretty well. His hearings tomorrow. I don't know, Josh, did you have anything else you want to say on it before we move on?
Well, I mean, people can watch the hearing live if you go to just Google Senate Foreign Relations Committee. It's tomorrow at 10 Eastern. So you can just watch it right there on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee website. I mean, they're going to ask, there's going to be 3 people in the hearing that they're up in this hearing, not just Brian, 2 others. And they're going to ask, all the senators are going to ask a bunch of questions to any of the 3 nominees. And then after that, each of the senators are going to do follow-up questions to Brian, and then Brian's going to have to respond to each of these senators and all of their follow-up questions. And then Senate goes on recess for Easter for a while. So people are like, oh, then he's the ambassador. I'm like, oh, they're not even going to vote in the committee. This is just a hearing. This is just the hearing. There's going to be a whole lot of questions and back and forth, and weeks will go by. And then maybe in May, the committee will vote to confirm him. And then if they do that, let's say in late May, then the United States Senate still has to vote for him. And that could be another month or 2 before they get around to doing that. And, so it could be June, July, who knows, before the full Senate votes to confirm him. Again, my good friend Joe Sella, he had to wait 18 months because, some senator went a little crazy after him for it. So, these things, they
and
take
who was that, Josh?
They take a life of their own. Yeah.
Is that Tim Kaine?
Gold Bar Bob.
Gold Bar.
Things did not end up well for him.
Oh man, I pray that someone presses Brian though. I feel like Brian would.
I think Brian's hoping someone
revel in
presses
that
him too.
I hope that they do.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to if you're up for Senate confirmation, no news is good news usually. So. Yeah. The last 20 years being an activist, Brian's gut is to probably be one thing, but in this case, it's best just to answer the questions.
Yes, all right, cool. Yes. Erica, you had Tradwife activities you'd like to share.
We sure did. So Meagan Kelly, formerly of Fox, formerly of All, she had reactions. So there was a New York Times article recently that showed increasing support for traditional gender roles among both Republican men and Republican women. So in the views of the Electorate Research Survey, the percentage of Republican men who agree that women should return to their traditional roles increased from 28%. The graphics are fantastic for those of you on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
All right. We've got a guy with an axe and the wife is there in a medieval dress with her sourdough. Yeah, it's great. So it's skyrocketed. The men say they want trad wives from 28% in 2022 all the way to 48% November 2024. And the women also had an increase in a desire for more traditional roles. Meagan Kelly saw the graph. Yeah, Josh is all thumbs up. Meagan Kelly was all thumbs down. She had a reaction. Let's just play a little bit of that there.
Sounds good.
And I talk to young conservative women all the time about their lives and their goals and, the things that they want. And what's happening is they can't find men who are maybe more conservative. Usually they're looking for somebody who is religious, a lot of conservative women tend to be God-loving conservatives. And they can't find a lot of young men who want to marry a working woman now. And this is an actual problem that's coming up on the right. And to me, it's so sad because it's like, how did we get to the point where we're now telling young, conservative, amazing women that they're not attractive if they also work, if they choose to, let's say, do what I'm doing and what you're doing. and like get their voice out there. But I'll stick with me just because I think conservatives listening to this will like the thought of another Meagan Kelly voice up and coming. Okay. Well, why wouldn't we want that? Why would we take somebody who's talented in this field and really wants to make a difference and have the messaging to her be, you're really not that valuable unless you give it up and go into the home and only have a family and only raise a family. And not only are we sending her that message, but young men are actually believing that.
So
who's making this argument?
I am like, Meagan, I don't see any evidence that this is actually what people mean. But are there like influencers that you can find on Instagram where the women are like, we're all 100% home? Absolutely. That is there. But in terms of wider societal trends, my dear friend Ivana Greco has an article in the Institute for Family Studies that I think is much more balanced than Meagan's take here, which Meagan, like, does the world want more Meagan Kellys? I don't know. Maybe. Sure. Like one or two we could fit. But can every single woman do that? And does every woman want to do that? Not that either. So Ivana, who wrote a chapter on family policy for us in For God, Country, and Sanity, our awesome Catholic vote book, she argues that understanding traditional gender roles to be equivalent with mom never earns a dime is ahistorical, but more to the point, it's also unlikely to be reflective of the way that conservatives are actually thinking about this issue, Meagan. So is the demand that women all go back into the home and never earn another cent and do no work outside of the kitchen the way that Meagan seems to be describing it? I really don't think that that's accurate. And so I would really urge you to think about this more as what Brad Wilcox calls neo-traditionalism, where the bulk of the child rearing, especially in the early years, goes to the wife, for sure, for obvious biological reasons, but that most conservative families have some kind of admixture where the mom is doing a little bit of contributing to family income, working outside the home, even in terms of volunteer work and helping to build the parish or to build the schools, the classical schools that children are going to. Women are doing that kind of work. There is absolutely a lot of work going outside the home, even for women who aren't in the workforce per se. But in conservative circles, women are in the workforce. So I just don't see evidence that what Meagan's doing here, which is casting this sort of this is what conservative men are saying, and conservative women who want to work can't find husbands. I'm not sure the evidence is there for that.
There's some of that. But again, I just feel like, I don't know. I mean, I agree with someone in the chat. It feels like Meagan Kelly maybe feels a little defensive about some of the choices that she did make, and now she's past the childbearing ages probably. I mean, born in 1970. So
she's like 60, right? She's like 55 or something.
55.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I just feel like when it comes to this kind of stuff, it would be helpful to have conversations that are like pragmatic and not so ideological. So there are some people like, I'm never going to let my wife work a day in her life. It's like, okay, it's not, I agree with what Ivana Greco said. It's not really historically accurate necessarily. Obviously there's some cost savings made when she's in the home because, you're able to, make your own food. You're not going to DoorDash all the time. There's cost savings. Also, my father-in-law would talk about the fact that he would talk to people, realize, because they used to have a daycare, his wife did, early 80s. And he'd say, you realize if you pay us this much to watch your kids, and then you go into the workforce and the wages you're making right now, you're paying half your money in taxes, essentially. Why are you doing this? You're not really getting ahead. And it's because they wanted that kind of to work because just they considered motherhood a drudgery. And I guess that's tough. But I feel like we should not be so ideological. I mean, Catholic Vote, most of the people who work here at Catholic Vote are pretty traditional minded, of course. But that doesn't mean that we're like, oh, so only men work here? Obviously, Erica.
Not to out us. I think we have more women that work for Catholic Vote than men.
Yeah. And
a lot of whom are mothers.
Yeah. And again, we have the option where people can work remote, and there's different, positions where, just the nature of the work is a little bit more siloed so that moms could do it from working from home, We have
Yeah.
people that do that, like writers and stuff like that.
Mhm.
So we're very much, we want to make it so that people can help supplement their family income and not try to go to a regular, 9 to 5 job where they're in a cubicle. They want to be a part of their kids' lives and have a little bit of income for that. I've said to my own daughters as well, I said, look, there's just been so much that has been shown and come forward with women as they get into their late 30s and early 40s, that they wish that they had had more children. They wish they'd had more opportunities. I think with, because there's so many more opportunities for working from home and that kind of stuff, there's an opportunity for you to try to think this through and be open to the possibility where you could take a break and work in the workforce. My own wife worked as a nurse, and then she was able to stop and dedicate it to raising the children. And then when she was done, she could go back into nursing. Now she runs the bookstore here, the Catholic bookstore. So there's opportunities to kind of, provide for the family, in a way where you're not like completely disruptive. But I do feel like, again, we got to get a little bit of the ideology out of this. And for most of the ideology for the last 50 years has been feminism.
Yeah. Well,
Feminism talks about like women should be able to make these choices. And so some women are like, oh, I want to stay home and raise a family. And then like the cat ladies just go after them. Like,
Yeah.
what?
Yeah.
What's the deal with that?
I think that the fundamental thing here, and this goes back to, do Americans want manufacturing jobs and that kind of drudgery, quote unquote? Do women want to be in the home with that drudgery with the diapers and all that? I think the issue is that we've lost sight as a culture, sometimes both on the right, but predominantly with feminism on the left, that what is labor for? What is this quote unquote drudgery for? Why do we work by the sweat of our brow? It's for the sake of our children and for the sake of building a family. And so I think that the woman's labor force participation or lack thereof, or other ways of working to contribute to society, all of it should be calibrated on what is in service of my marriage and my children. And then comes every other consideration, but not just for the woman, right?
Yes.
That's over down to the father. Fathers also work for the sake of their children. They work for the sake of their family first. And for both sexes to reorient and to see their careers and their jobs and all of that in light of the good of their children and the good of their wives or their husbands, that is the reorientation that has to happen. And that, frankly, the sexual revolution smashed for both sexes.
Yeah. I think the
You know,
key
there's
to
a
this
really
is
good-
sexual revolution.
There was a really, oh, I'm sorry, Tom, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, I think people get a little bit too narrow with this conversation, especially if you were like to take a step back and look historically. Like, working in an industrialized world is actually kind of a new phenomenon for most of humanity. And so the idea that like, okay, the husband's going to wear a suit and go into the job, like that kind of started in the 60s because of industrialization. But before that, you had people that lived in towns and villages in a much more like communal way.
Right.
And the work wasn't like, oh, I'm going to go get a paycheck from a boss. It was, I got to go till the fields. I got to go be a cobbler or whatever, like whatever.
I mean, I think
the
it goes
family
way
trade
back
was.
in the 1960s, like maybe the 1860s. But
Yeah, like you could
definitely
go-
that industrialization was a break in the
Industrialized,
way we work.
it changed that. It changed the way we live in community. Even if you look at European towns, like the walkability and the community aspect of all of that, like look at America with the roads and the highways and all that. Like all of these things actually play a factor into this. All that to say, the added social pressure of like, and I don't think anyone, maybe some people do this on purpose or whatever, but like they make women feel bad for one way or the other, whether or not that's like they stay home or they go to work. And I don't think anyone's making that decision. Maybe some people are. Most people are not making that decision as like an FU or like, I'm going to live this way, even though I know it's not whatever. Most of the time it's out of necessity. Like you have to do it because the economy, your family situation, whatever. I think that the ping that most women feel is actually natural and legitimate of wanting to be home to raise their children. And people that fight against that, I think, oh my gosh, think about how many mind-altering drugs have been offered to the modern woman in terms of getting on birth control since you're 14 to take care of your acne. Like what that does to you, what you get attracted to, how your hormones are, like it, how you live your life, like guilt-free sex, right? Like just acting however you want. Like that's the metropolitan idea of happiness. That is very radical and different than, hundreds and thousands of years before that would just not be how it worked. And for good reason.
But you touched on something I want to expand on. I think is very important because the transition from an agrarian to an industrial economy does make a big impact. I mean, like you go back 100 years ago and you have a hardware store where the husband runs the store, but then his kids are helping out, and that kind of stuff. And so there's opportunities for the family to be actually economically beneficial to the bottom line. Okay. Then you transition to, like you say, the 1950s, 60s, 70s, 80s, where dad goes off, drives in the car for 20 minutes to go to some other town and work a 9-to-5 job. A really good holy priest out of Michigan, Father Joe Krupp, he's Joe in Black on Twitter. He talked about this. He got into this debate, and I thought he had a really good thing to say. He said, men came home from World War II completely traumatized.
Right.
Culture had no room for understanding or way to deal with that, so men just simply went to work, focused on their families, and had a huge number of children. It was one of the first generations attempting to deal with the reality of transitioning from this agrarian culture to an urban culture. In an agrarian culture, you have children because they help. And then the death rate among children was also very high, he said. In the urban culture, children cost more money than you make from them. And they also, they tend to live long. You tend to live longer and they live longer. So the church needs to understand this a little bit better and grapple with this. Like, and everyone, and so is Erica, and your family have embraced the culture of life ethic that John Paul talks about. But it's like, it is true. It's not like my kids are like helping me, grow crops, and that's lowering the grocery bill. They're all economically, unfortunately on the ledger, they're deficits, and I love them. Okay, so it doesn't matter. But like, this is the kind of
it's a trade deficit.
Yeah,
Get a tariff on your kids.
We live in a car-based society, so that like, that's like one of the things that you look at the fertility rate, and one of the things that drives, has a major effect on the fertility rate is the fact that we have car seats now. Right. And you look at the back row and you're like, I can't fit 3 car seats in this, and
got to get a bigger van.
Can we afford a minivan, or we just stay at 2 kids, So these are the things that we, they drive all this kind of stuff, and having 2 kids and then maybe going back into the workforce because that wasn't too much of a break. All these things we have to have these discussions with. I think it would behoove us as Catholics to not bring rigid ideology into it. We should try to encourage women to consider the possibility of, like, there's more to life than just being a worker drone. Like, why do you want to live in a cubicle for most of your life? There's so much, motherhood is enriching, and try to encourage it and sell this grander vision. I think that's great. But we should also, have enough humility to understand that not everyone's economic situation is the same. And not to just like think, oh, you must be a, feminist like Gloria Steinem, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay.
No, I'm writing down here too. Like, I actually think most of this, Eric, I think brought this up, but prioritizing the family is actually kind of a radical decision to make in modern society. Like, if I just think about modern society of all the pressures forcing us to stuff, it's like modernize school for your children. So you got to get the best grade, best ACT school, tutors, activities, sports. Like, that's a full-time job in itself. For the man, make as much money as possible, workaholic, go crazy. Then we got the girl boss thing going on right now. Like, you got to go be your person, girl boss, that type of thing. Hyper consumption, like even think like kids with iPads or
going to Disney.
Like, exactly right. Like buy as much as possible, have both cars, European vacations,
music lessons, sports leagues.
Oh my gosh, just like roll it up. And at the end of the day, like if these are left unchecked, it actually is just, it's dissolving the family. It's not like the trad wave conversation is like a small part of, I think, many different forces all pointing at the same thing, to tear apart your family, and all for the guise of this is somehow an end good. And it actually, I think, relates in a lot of ways to the economy we talked about earlier. But like, I think all studies are showing like married religious are the happiest groups of people on the planet. It's not even close. Married religious. If we think marriage and family are a good, necessary for the flourishing of individuals, but then also by proxy, the community, by proxy, the country, these are really things you need to sit down and consider, and finding a partner that is on the same page with that, which Meagan Kelly kind of oddly brought up of like, women working are not attractive. I think most people now meet their wife when they're working. Like, everyone works in some way. So like using that as the the bar for whether or not someone's attractive is bizarre. I don't know if anyone I've talked to has ever said that. Like, oh, my wife was working. So
there's 300 million
like,
people in this country. There's going to be lots of experiences out there, of course. But
yeah, but most of them work because this is the modern world we live in which, like, before in the agrarian or whatever, women worked in different capacities. Now everyone works. Like,
part of it too is that social media, it's easy to try to find, like the lightning rod thing. And so like there's been, we've been now in like the 4th or 5th decade now of, the girl boss, like women working and never even questioning the wisdom of it. Like, and for traditional minded people who say, you know what, it's better for the mom to stay home and have kids. And, instead of saying it like that, like, let's just have the summer dress and the sourdough and, all this bad stuff. And it just, it makes the feminists who are like 65 years old explode. And so part of it is this social media thing.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, we got to slide in the Twilight Zone now, but hopefully that was helpful. Thank you, Erica, for bringing up the Treadwave conversation.
You're welcome.
Well, my Twilight Zone kind of relates to it.
Well, should we go? I think we should probably go sad up top. Well, disappointing.
No, let's do mine because it rolls right into this whole thing. I mean,
all right.
So there's these new moms in Congress who are demanding the ability to do a vote by proxy because they've got little children that are under the age, 6 months or younger.
Yeah. And we covered this with Tom. It's ridiculous.
No, I want to hear Mercer's rant though.
I would love to.
Well, I mean, part of this, I feel like, this is a case where it's like, it's not just a regular job in the office or something like that. You are actually trying to be a representative for 700,000 people. And this woman, Brittany Peterson, she's from Colorado. She's a Democrat. She, by the way, supported legislation in the state of Colorado that would allow you to kill a baby up until and after the point of birth. So don't think this woman is super pro-baby. But here she is giving a press conference to NBC, that one photo, holding her baby. And then there she's holding the photo, her baby when she's giving a speech on the floor of the House of Representatives. And then she's in her office tweeting about, how horrible it is that some Republicans don't think she should be able to vote by proxy. And she's got her baby there, she's feeding. And then she's standing outside the U.S. Capitol with her baby. It's like, it kind of shows me you've got your son or your child there in all these different spots. I kind of get the feeling that this idea that you couldn't possibly do your job, have a baby and show up and vote, you're kind of disproving it.
You're kind of doing it. Right.
You're in front of CNBC.
Have your baby everywhere. So it tells me you could do this job. So again, this is one of those things where, like, my wife and I have 6 children. Now the youngest is almost 10. But like when we had little babies, I wouldn't even imagine turning to my wife and saying, "Hey, guess what? I'm going to run for Congress."
I know, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to bring.
I would definitely think she was crazy.
Yeah.
Like what? Like you have, like is the most important thing you can do to represent the 4th district of Colorado or whatever it is, or is it take care of that kid? I don't know. Like, I mean, like we have people in Congress who are like 90 years old. You can't possibly tell me that you can never run for Congress again. Like, take care of the baby now and run in 10, 15 years.
Exactly.
It's so crazy to me.
Yeah.
Do the job.
But apparently she can do it anyway. By the way, going to get this in real quick.
Yeah.
It is kind of ridiculous that one member of Congress represents 700 to 900,000 people. That's an abomination. We should have one member of Congress for every like 40,000 people. And yes, that would mean a Congress would have like 2,500 people in it. And I think that would be awesome because it would be much more representative and much more responsible and responsive to the people. 100%. Now we have an oligarchy in Washington that doesn't represent us. And that's why.
It's a vintage Mercer take right there.
Did you say oligarchy? I thought Elon Musk was the only oligarch in the United States.
Oh yeah, I did kind of want to get your. I wanted to get your reaction on the protests over the weekend. They were pretty hilarious.
I saw one of them. I was at the cathedral. I was in Hartford for my daughter's confirmation. Shout out to the great Anna Therese Anthony. So I was in there, and I was with the baby in the back of the cathedral, and I'm holding the baby, he's screaming, and suddenly starts trickling by me all these like 70-year-old people with these big signs, and I was like, what's going on? And it was the Elon Musk protest of Hartford. So I saw one of the 1,300 protests that happened this weekend.
Yeah.
Felt like I was a man on the street.
The protests were awesome. I had a chance to see someone posted a high resolution photo of a crowd, and he goes, "You notice anything about it?" It's like, yeah, it is like 95% white and over 65. It was pretty obvious.
Yeah. Funded
It
by
just shows that the
socialists.
coalition on the Democratic Party now is made up of, 4 groups: boomers who watch cable all day, minorities who support, welfare stuff, women who get crazy on,
Abortion.
SSRIs, and then you've got the whole rainbow crowd.
These Elon Musk protests look a lot like mass at your local Jesuit parish.
Or an editorial meeting of the New Republic.
All right, I got to get mine out of the way because it's sad for multiple reasons. Theodore McCarrick passed away, and for anyone, I mean, I don't know how you could be listening to the show and not know who Theodore McCarrick was, but he was cardinal laicized after the Vatican found him guilty of sexually abusing minors and adults. He died on April 3rd in Missouri. He was 94. It's almost hard to like the word millstone comes to mind. It's hard to think of anything in modern Catholic history more damaging to the faithful, to the American Catholic Church. Just the abuse of power is staggering. I don't even know if he had anyone with him at the end of his life. It's just really sad. He had dementia. They couldn't even really charge him with anything. All that I really know of, because I'm younger, is like the common attack of like the church protects pedophiles. The church is full of pedophiles. And I think a lot of people would point right back to the Boston Globe report.
Right. And
Theodore McCarrick being the main orchestrator. So, I mean, you guys have more experience than I do, but I saw that and it's hard to imagine.
Yeah, he was in charge of actually recommending people for different, to become bishops of different dioceses. And he created a whole web of people supporting him. People like the current leader in Washington right now, who was in San Diego before, owes it to McElroy. And he's not the only one. There's dozens. And the thing is, if they hadn't figured this out here in the last, what was it, 5 years ago, they found this out, there would have been glowing reviews of this guy. He would have been traveling with Francis everywhere. He was one of Francis's, top advisors. This guy, just a wickedly evil man. And he used his power and influence, it makes me gross. It makes me sick. And by the way, somebody had sent in a message that was frustrated with my take on the death penalty, and especially it was a deacon, and he couldn't believe that I supported the death penalty for people who had abused minors. And it's like, well, I'm not the only one who thinks this. The governor of Idaho just signed into law making the death penalty for people who abuse children. He didn't single out priests, obviously. It isn't. I can't. To me, I can't even think of a more heinous crime. I mean, like rape is just awful, of course, but for someone who's a tender age, and this guy, groom people, and again, like Father Maciel, where you groom people and then you try to, I'll put you to confession, and you're the one that was the sin. Just like
Rupnik, same thing.
Rupnik.
I wish the Vatican had like a group of investigators that would just go around and hunt these guys down and get rid of them. It's just, I'm not saying vigilante wise, but just track them down and bring them to justice.
Right. And I think, the whole thing, when I heard the news on Friday, I had to go for a walk. Like I just put the baby in the stroller, go walk, say a Divine Mercy chaplet, because it was so disturbing to call it all up again. This was probably like the defining moment in a negative way for me of my relationship with the American Catholic Church and the bishops. I mean, I was in college. I was coming back from my study abroad. I landed in the Boston airport. I remember walking off the plane and I saw the headline in the Boston Globe. It was right there. And it was a life-altering moment, and it's affected so many people. To me, the whole McCarrick thing, and then it coming up again in 2018, right? You think, okay, we're working through this. The bishops are like doing zero tolerance, and we get this report and blah, blah, blah. And then in 2018, it all comes up again, and nothing had been done.
Well, some things have been done, but not enough.
Well, yeah,
Not nearly enough.
no,
I
no
know.
heads had rolled.
I don't want to
And
say no because nothing, but yeah.
Yeah, that was an overstatement, but not too far off the truth. And I think, and then in 2020, we got the second report. We got the McCarrick report from the Vatican, which was happy to name Benedict and happy to name John Paul II, but didn't name a single living churchman who was connected to McCarrick or responsible for what had happened. And to me, it was, like you said, Josh, there ought to be it from the Vatican investigations to like root this out. But it's like a fungus. It's like trying to root out this fungus that has taken over your whole garden, and there's mushrooms coming up everywhere, and it just sits there year after year.
Ultimately why Benedict quit. Like, people don't get it. Like, he just felt like he did not have the stamina at his age to be able to fight this, and he said, I need to make way for someone who come in and clean house. And that is absolutely
that did not happen.
not what Francis has done at all.
That was play. Oh man, sad because
but that's the point. That's why Benedict did it. He talked.
Benedict makes me sad too.
Benedict talks about the filth that was in the church.
Yeah.
Benedict makes me so sad. He was such an amazing man and theologian and what the Rottweiler. I mean,
he was not. He was a
German Shepherd.
He's a professor who petted cats and drank orange Fanta Pop. I mean, the guy did not want to be a Rottweiler at all. In fact, when he kept begging John Paul, I just want to go back to Germany and give lectures.
Yeah,
and the Pope's, I need you to stay. Yeah. John Paul's, I need you to stay. But
yeah, I think for me the best tweet. I don't know if you can pull this up. It's the Chris Annadale one there, Pogo. But he made the point. He was like, the devastating thing. This is a lesson for all of us. When we see sin around us in our lives, and we're like, I don't want to get involved. I don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to do this. And he said, so this is Chris Annadale. The last chapter in the McCarrick story hasn't been written yet, but I think the central fact that ties it all together is no one loved Theodore enough to make him stop. Of the dozens of his brother princes of the church who knew his crimes, none was willing to risk saving him. And he died in a state of dementia. We pray that before he slipped into that, he had a moment of real repentance. But part of being a Christian and part of loving our brothers is to, when we see sin, to step up, to name it, not just for our own sake, not just for the sake of the victims, but for the sake of the sinner and the entire church. And the reality is that Theodore McCarrick was doing these disgusting things since at least the early 80s, if not since he was in seminary himself. And no one at any point was willing to risk their, maybe there were a few, maybe there were a couple and we never heard their names because they were shuffled off to Buffalo, literally. But when we see sin, we have to say something and do something because otherwise it turns into this. And how many souls?
99, Cardinal John O'Connor privately warned Vatican officials. Like that was kind of the problem with all of this was there probably were some people that did, but tried to follow proper channels. And of course it fell on people who were complicit. And I mean,
right.
Yeah, I didn't know that Cardinal O'Connor did that. Gosh,
he did.
I love him even more.
Privately warned Vatican officials of allegations against McCarrick, including that he was known to invite seminarians to sleep in his bed when he was the Archbishop of Newark.
But nothing sexual ever happened. So it was just an impropriety. Like, no, you just don't sleep in bed with anyone when you're like a priest.
Whole thing just makes me so sad. I just think of how many people that were driven away from the truth because they couldn't get over this scandal. And it's almost hard to blame some of these people.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully justice is served and pray for the repose of his soul. He needs it.
Amen.
Someone was asking, I'm sure I feel similar on this. Like, is there a good resource? Do you guys know of any like books that kind of summarize the situation for people? Like if they get asked about the pedophilia ring or what was going on inside the church, like, does anyone have a good resource?
Has yet to be written. That's what I'm going to say. I mean, there was some really good coverage of it all. I would say, I rag on the pillar guys. I do rag on the pillar guys. But as far as documentation goes, they're pretty good on the stuff. If you go back to their earlier stuff around 2018, 1920.
Did Bishop Barron write something on it? Rosie's saying Bishop Barron had a book.
A book.
I'd have to look. I have to fact check that. Rosie, you gotta go fact check
We'll
that.
go do some digging.
Honestly,
for you.
I invite the chat though. If someone knows something that would be good to share, we're happy to do that.
Summary of the situation. Yeah. Anyway, Erica, your Twilight Zone before we go.
Okay, quick Twilight Zone. I just wanted to give a little Colorado update. So, not only is Colorado going to fund abortions because it would be cheaper to kill the children than to let them be born, but now Colorado Democrats have issued some extraordinary measures to push through two absolutely diabolical bills. So this weekend, Democrats voted for these two bills, limit debate to 2 hours on two bills on a Sunday afternoon to push them through. So we've got the first bill being the abortion. My internet is not loading. Here we go. Forcing taxpayers to fund abortions. That was the hearing that we covered in the Twilight Zone last week. And then HB 251312, which is a direct attack on parents that labels parents abusive if they do not affirm their child's chosen gender, threatening to take away custody for parents who will dead name their children, who will suggest that they are confused and they need any kind of therapy other than gender affirming care. This was, it was notable that this debate, so quote unquote, the 2 hours of debate was announced at the last minute on Friday. And the debate was held on a Sunday afternoon. Many groups were invited to the hearing, but no non-LGBTQ plus AI, whatever, parental groups were invited or notified even that they could come and testify. So State Representative Yara Zakai, her comment was, a well-stakeholdered bill does not need to be discussed with hate groups, such as Moms for Liberty. That's what she was referring to specifically, I believe. She said, we don't ask someone passing civil rights legislation to go ask the KKK their opinion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
So equating parental rights groups with the KKK, Colorado, you are a mile high and not in a good
what is
way.
hot? What's in the water out there?
Earth. Come back to earth, guys. So yeah, this act concerning legal protections for transgender individuals requires courts to consider dead naming, misgendering, or threatening to publish material related to an individual's, name your child's, gender-affirming healthcare services as types of coercive control, which gives judges then in custody cases all that they need legally to remove custody of the child from the objecting parent or parents. So absolutely dark days in Colorado. Shout out to Representative Brandy Bradley. Is that her? Yeah, Brandy Bradley, who brought this to public attention. She's like, wait a minute. Why'd you call me into session on Sunday? Oh, it's these two bills. So if you're in Colorado, check in with her and see what can be done, because it's dark days up there in the mountains.
Real quick on the last thing that we'd said before, someone in the chat noted, Bishop Robert Barron wrote Letter to a Suffering Church.
Oh, I forgot about that one. That was good. Thank you for bringing that up, Bishop Barron.
All right. Sweet. Well, hey, good show, guys. Thank you for joining everyone in the chat live here. If you guys want to join in the future, 11 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube. Thank you to everyone joining. If you want to support us, best way to do so, check out our sponsors, Dallas, Home Title Lock, and you can join the Champions Club, catholicvote.org/champions. Leave reviews, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. You can actually comment on Spotify now, which is kind of cool. So if you're listening on Spotify, send me a comment. But pray for us. St. Thomas More, Our Lady of Guadalupe, St. Fidelis. Pray for us. Pray for Brian as he bears down for hopefully a successful confirmation.